Hey everyone, welcome to another Deep Dive with us.
Yeah, it's good to be here.
Today we're going to be looking at two letters that were sent to us
Yeah.
by a woman who is imprisoned in Turkey.
Really powerful letters.
Yeah, they really give us a personal view, I think, of what happens when families get caught up in political turmoil.
Yeah, and it's not just like a news report, you know? These
Right.
letters are like raw. You can feel the emotion.
Exactly.
It's someone's lived experience.
So the first letter was written in July 2024
Okay.
from the Bafra T-Type closed prison
Wow.
in Samsun, Turkey.
Okay.
And she starts off by explaining that she and her husband were arrested in September 2023 while trying to escape to Greece.
Okay.
And they're accused of being members of FETÖ, which we
Oh.
will talk about later.
We'll get into that. Yeah, that's a whole other.
That's a whole other thing.
It's important to note, though, that FETÖ is considered a terrorist organization by the Turkish government.
Right.
It is definitely controversial, though, and we'll unpack all that later.
Exactly. So we're going to stick with her story for now,
Yeah.
kind of the personal experience that she's going through.
Yeah.
She talks about the prison conditions being severely overcrowded.
Oh, wow.
Like 25 people to a cell meant for 8.
Oh, my gosh.
She had hoped initially for justice,
Right.
and that's not what she found.
Yeah.
She has this really powerful image where she talks about crushed grass.
Ugh. That's such a powerful metaphor, isn't it?
It is.
When you think about, people caught up in these political conflicts and how they get trampled,
Exactly.
It's so sad.
And then she talks about how she has to stand on a chair just to feel the sun on her face.
Oh,
You can feel that longing for freedom,
yeah.
for basic human needs.
Yeah, just the simple things,
The things we take for granted.
Totally.
But then it gets even more heart-wrenching when she talks about seeing her son again after 190 days.
Oh,
Her
God.
7-year-old son.
I can't imagine that wait, for both of them.
Yeah.
He's so young. And she's not only dealing with her own situation, but, the pain that it's causing her child.
Right, and the question that he asks her,
Oh, I can't even imagine.
why are you crying?
Oh, my God.
Just breaks your heart.
Breaks your heart.
Because he doesn't understand all the complexities of the situation.
Right.
He just sees his mom in distress.
Exactly.
And then she mentions that he's learned these song lyrics that say, I have a problem I can no longer keep inside.
Oh, wow.
It's like he's internalizing all of this trauma.
He's absorbing it.
Yeah.
Oh, that's so sad.
And that leads her to ask this really important question.
Yeah.
Who was the punishment given to?
Wow.
Was it her husband, or was it their innocent child?
That's a question a lot of people ask in these kinds of situations, isn't it?
It is.
Because it's not just the individual who gets punished, it's the family.
Right.
Especially the children who are often forgotten.
Yeah.
They get caught up in it, and governments, I think a lot of times they don't consider those ripple effects. They just don't think about the impact on the family as a whole and, that fundamental right to family life.
Right.
That can be violated when you pursue political goals.
Exactly.
And that's what we're seeing here.
And she quotes Victor Hugo
Oh, wow.
from Les Miserables,
Okay.
talking about how justice systems sometimes get things wrong.
Yeah.
It's crazy that a quote from 1862 is still relevant in 2024.
It is. It's kind of like, wow, have we not learned?
Right.
Some things haven't changed as much as we think.
Right.
It really makes you think.
And she's afraid that things haven't changed enough.
Right.
She uses this Kurdish phrase,
Okay.
"Pursu birds,"
What does that mean?
which means hunger and fear.
Wow.
And she said her grandmother always told her those were the two things that could kill a person.
Wow, that's heavy.
And now she's experiencing that fear.
Yeah, firsthand.
Yeah.
It's not just the fear of the system, right? It's the
Right.
fear of being away from her child and the fear of what the future holds.
Yeah.
It's like this multi-layered fear that consumes you.
Exactly.
It's powerful.
And she makes this really chilling statement
Yeah.
saying that one person's word can imprison another
Wow.
and take away their freedom and their dreams.
It's a reminder of the power of accusations
Yeah.
and how systems can be abused.
Right.
In a just system, everyone should have due process.
Of course.
Like, you're innocent until proven guilty, and everyone has a chance to defend themselves.
Absolutely.
That's what we should be striving for.
So let's move on to her second letter,
Okay.
which is dated October 2024.
Okay.
So a few months later.
Yeah.
And we find out that she has been sentenced to 6 years and 3 months.
Wow.
the weight of that sentence is
Yeah.
hard to imagine.
Definitely.
But I think before we delve into that, we need to take a step back
Okay.
and try to understand this FTO organization a little bit more.
Yeah.
Because it seems to be at the root of this whole situation. You mentioned that it's a very complicated and controversial issue.
It is.
So in part two, let's unpack that a bit more.
Let's get into it. Welcome back. This is tough stuff, but it's really important to understand FETO,
Right.
Especially given its role in all this. So
Yeah, you mentioned earlier that this designation of FETO as the terrorist organization is controversial.
it is. Yeah, it's complicated.
But can you break that down for us a little more? Like, what makes it so complex?
Well, so FETO, as the Turkish government defines it, is a network that they allege is led by this guy, Fethullah Gulen,
Okay.
who is an Islamic cleric who lives in the U.S.
Okay.
Now the Turkish government accuses him of orchestrating a coup attempt back in 2016 to overthrow President Erdogan.
So from their point of view, this is a serious national security threat.
Absolutely. They've taken huge action since 2016, like massive purges of suspected ETO members from all sorts of institutions.
Oh, wow.
Like the military courts, even schools.
Really?
Tens of thousands of people detained, fired, put on trial.
So that's where that ambiguity you talked about comes in.
Exactly. And that's where the controversy really heats up.
Okay, so you've got the government's perspective,
Yeah.
but you also said there are people who criticize this designation.
Yeah, for sure.
What are their arguments?
Well, critics, and these include like human rights organizations and some international observers,
Okay.
they argue that the evidence actually linking Gulen to the coup is pretty weak. And it's largely circumstantial.
Oh, wow.
So they think the government is basically using FETO as this like catch-all term to silence anyone who opposes them.
So it's a way to consolidate power and crack down on any dissent, even if it has nothing to do with FETO.
That's the word. The definition of what makes someone a member of FETO is super broad and vague. So critics say this lets them just cast a really wide net, and they sweep up people with only like flimsy connections or anyone who falls out of favor with the government.
It creates this like chilling effect then, right?
Totally. People are afraid to speak out.
Right.
Because they're worried they'll be labeled as a FETO sympathizer.
And then face consequences.
Exactly.
It would be terrifying to live in a place where expressing an opinion or associating with certain people could lead to you being accused of terrorism.
Absolutely. It creates this climate of fear where people hesitate to criticize the government or even have open debate.
Wow.
Because they're afraid of the repercussions,
Yeah.
And that can be really detrimental to a society.
It can.
In terms of its ability to function.
So how does all of this connect back to this woman and her letters?
That's the big question.
Where does she fit into this picture?
We don't know the specifics of her case.
Right.
Or the evidence they have against her. Was she actually involved with a FETO, or did she get swept up in this post-coup crackdown because of some loose association, or maybe even targeted for entirely different reasons?
And her letters don't really give us those specific details, do they?
No, they don't. She maintains that she's innocent. And she focuses mainly on her experience in prison and the effect it's having on her son.
Okay.
But her story is a really important reminder that behind these political labels and battles, there are real people whose lives are being deeply affected.
It's a powerful example of how individuals can become collateral damage in these larger political conflicts.
Absolutely. And regardless of her guilt or innocence,
Right.
her letters make us think about the ethics of mass detentions, the blurred lines between legitimate security concerns and political persecution,
Right.
and the long-term consequences
Yeah.
for individuals and families.
And let's not forget her plea for a legal provision
Yes.
to protect children in similar situations.
That's a big one. She's specifically asking for, a way to defer sentences for mothers in her situation so they can be with their kids.
Yeah.
It's powerful. It's that mother's instinct
Yeah.
to protect her child. And it asks the legal system to actually consider the child's well-being, as a factor in her sentence.
It's a really complex question.
It is. It brings up so many ethical and legal questions about how to balance the needs of both parent and child.
Yeah.
It's not a simple good guys versus bad guys.
No.
There's a lot of gray area. So it's important to approach this with nuance and not jump to conclusions.
That's a lot to process.
Yeah.
We've gone from this woman's heartbreaking personal story to the complexities of FETO and the government's response. It really shows how political turmoil can have these ripple effects.
It does. And these letters, while they're specific to Turkey and FETÖ,
Right.
they bring up universal questions about power and justice and the human cost of political conflicts. They really challenge us to look beyond the headlines and think critically about the information we're getting and to consider the ethical implications of actions that are taken in the name of security or political ideology.
It's easy to get caught up in the big picture of global politics.
Yeah.
But it's important to remember the individuals who are affected.
As we head into the last part of our deep dive, I want to leave you with this.
Good.
Given what we've learned about FETÖ, the potential for abuse in legal systems and the impact on families, what responsibility do we have as individuals, living in relatively free societies?
Right.
To speak up against injustice, should we be demanding more transparency and accountability from our own governments? What about advocating for human rights at home and abroad?
That is a lot to think about, and we'll try to find some answers in the final part of our deep dive, so stay tuned. Okay, so we're back and ready to wrap up our look at these letters.
Yeah.
And you really left us with a question there at the end of part 2.
I did.
That makes you think,
Yeah.
about our own role in all of this. It's easy to feel helpless when you hear these stories.
Yeah.
But you're saying we're not powerless.
Not at all. We may not be able to, single-handedly change these big global things.
Right.
But we can all make a difference.
Okay, so how do we do that? What are some things that we can actually do?
Well, I think the first thing is we have to stay informed.
Okay.
And that means going deeper than the headlines,
Yeah.
Look for different perspectives, especially the ones that challenge our own views.
So being critical about the information we're taking in.
Exactly. Double check those sources. Think about who's saying what and why.
Right.
Be open to the fact that there might be more to the story.
And once we've done that,
then we can start talking about it.
Yeah.
Share what you've learned, with friends, with family.
Yeah.
Challenge misinformation when you see it.
Right.
These might seem like small things,
Yeah.
but they can really make a difference.
It's about using your voice to help the people who are being silenced.
Exactly. Amplify those voices. And, another thing you can do, support the organizations that are working on the ground, to defend human rights and support political prisoners.
Okay.
There are tons of groups out there doing amazing work in Turkey and all over the world.
Yeah.
You can donate to them.
Volunteer or just spread the word about what they're doing.
So taking action.
Exactly. Turning your concern into action.
Yeah.
Even if it feels small.
Right.
And remember, all those individual actions, they add up to something bigger.
Right.
They create pressure for change.
Yeah.
You can also contact your elected officials.
Okay.
Let them know that human rights matter in foreign policy.
Right.
Support ethical businesses.
Okay.
Advocate for workers' rights.
Yeah.
And on the other hand, you can boycott the companies that are contributing to human rights abuses.
Right.
You vote with your wallet.
It all comes back to that idea that we're all connected.
We are.
We might feel far away from what's happening in Turkey.
Yeah.
But our choices really matter.
They do. Our actions, our words even, they all have an impact.
We're part of this global community.
We are.
And it's our shared responsibility to stand up for human rights and try to make a more just world.
Couldn't have said it better myself. That's a powerful reminder that we're not helpless.
Yeah.
We have the power to make change.
Absolutely. We can choose to use our voices and our actions to create a more compassionate world.
Well, this has been a really eye-opening discussion.
It has.
I think her story and all the context you've given us is a real wake-up call.
Yeah.
It shows the human cost of these situations.
It does.
And how important it is to stand up for what's right.
I agree.
And to our listeners, keep learning, keep questioning.
Yes.
And find ways to use your voice to make a difference.
Thanks for listening, everyone.
Thanks for being here.